I pulled him over because of the taillight. That's what I told myself anyway. The truth is, I noticed the car before I even saw the busted light. It was a matte black Aston Martin DB11. Low, sleek, purring, like it knew it didn't belong in a part of town where most people drove rusted-out Hondas. It was parked half crooked in front of a liquor store that sold more lottery tickets than actual liquor. I'd been sitting in the cruiser, finishing my second coffee of the night, when he walked out of the store. Paper bag in hand, tailored navy coat flapping a little in the wind, collar turned up like he'd stepped out of a magazine. Even from a block away, he didn't look like a guy who belonged here, and for some reason, I followed him. He pulled out slowly, turned without signaling, and sure enough, left taillight was out. I flipped on my lights. He pulled over smoothly, no hesitation. I walked up to the window expecting some Wall Street asshole in Ray-Bans. Instead, he looked normal. Tired, maybe. Not cocky. Late 30s, maybe 40. Thick stubble across his jaw. Hair a little messy in that I paid someone to make it look messy way. When he turned toward me, his expression was calm, like he was used to people coming up to his window. "You got me," he said before I even said anything. His voice was low, easy. "Taillight, right?" "Yeah," I said, suddenly unsure if I needed to explain myself. He handed me his license and registration without being asked. "Was going to get it fixed tomorrow. Got a new one in the trunk." I glanced at the address on his license. West Hollywood. Figures. He watched me the whole time, not in a challenging way, but like he was reading me. He didn't flinch when I looked at him a beat too long. "You're far from home," I said, handing the card back. He shrugged one shoulder. "Needed air." I looked at the liquor bag. "That air come with whiskey in it?" He smirked. "Tonight, yeah. Long day." I nodded, about to walk away, maybe just give him a warning and go back to pretending to patrol. But then he said, "Can I ask something?" I paused. "Sure. You ever just drive around this late to feel less alone?" His tone wasn't flirty, wasn't weird, just honest. And something about it caught me off guard. I took a step back. "Stay here," I said. "I'll be right back." I went back to the cruiser, ran his plates, double-checked everything. No priors, no record, just a clean plate, an expired gym membership on file, and the kind of wealth that doesn't always show up on paper. I gave him the warning, told him to get the light fixed, and was about to walk away when he said my name. "Officer Grant." I turned. He was leaning slightly out the window now, the wind catching his coat. "I don't know if this is inappropriate, but if you ever need air too, I've got a decent rooftop view." "No pressure." He handed me a business card. Just a name and a number, and an address. Eli Winters. I took the card, mostly because I didn't know what else to do. He didn't wink or smirk, just nodded, rolled up the window, and pulled off into the night. I stood there for a full minute, card in hand, watching his taillights disappear. I should have thrown the card away, but I didn't. I kept the card in my wallet for 5 days. Every time I opened it to pay for coffee or grab my ID, it was there. Eli Winters, simple block lettering on heavy cardstock, like he wanted it to feel expensive without trying. I told myself I wasn't going to use it, that it would be crossing a line. But then Wednesday night hit me like a truck. There was a domestic on 14th that ended ugly. Kids screaming, neighbors shouting, the guy cuffed with blood on his shirt. I had to talk the woman down until the EMTs came, and when it was all over, I sat in my cruiser with the engine running, staring at the dashboard like it might offer answers. It didn't. I drove for a while, aimless, windows down, uniform still on, trying to let the wind scrape some of the night off me. I don't know why I pulled over. I don't even remember making the decision. One minute I was passing Wilshire. The next I was parked in front of a modern-looking apartment building that probably cost more per square foot than my entire paycheck. The address on the card matched the building. I stood outside for a minute before going in. Doorman nodded like I belonged there, said Mr. Winters was on the penthouse level. Top floor, of course. When the elevator doors opened, I half expected him not to answer. Maybe it was a test. A joke. Maybe rich guys like to play games with bored cops. But he answered on the first knock. Barefoot. Gray t-shirt, loose joggers. No cologne, no arrogance. Just him, holding a mug of something warm. He blinked. Then smiled. Didn't think you'd actually come. I didn't think I would either. He stepped aside. Come in. The place was clean but not cold. Hardwood floors, big windows, a record player in the corner, something soft playing, jazz maybe, or some kind of instrumental that felt like silk. He led me through the open space to a narrow stairwell in the back. We climbed to the rooftop, and he wasn't lying. It had a hell of a view. Downtown stretched out in front of us, lit up and humming, the skyline sharp against the night. There was a small seating area, a couple of plants in big pots, a bottle of bourbon on a table between two chairs. I figured if you came, it'd be because you had one of those nights, he said, settling into one of the chairs. I sat across from him. That obvious? He poured 2 fingers of bourbon into a glass and handed it to me. No questions asked. We didn't talk at first, just sat in silence, sipping, watching the city. It wasn't awkward. It felt like breathing, like I'd been underwater all day and finally broke the surface. Eventually he asked, You live alone? Yeah. He nodded. Me too. Never figured out how to share space with someone who didn't make me want to scream. I laughed, the sound surprising even me. That sounds healthy. He smirked. I didn't say I was good at relationships. The conversation drifted from there. Music. The city. My job. His work. Some kind of tech consulting gig that involved late Zoom calls and investor meetings that sounded like code for boredom. He was easy to talk to. He didn't fill the silence just to avoid it. He let it breathe. At one point, he looked at me across the small table and said, You've got that thing most cops don't. I raised an eyebrow. Yeah? What's that? Stillness. I didn't know what to say to that. You feel things, he added, like he wasn't trying to flatter me. Just stating fact. Most guys in uniform, they build a wall around their guts. You didn't. I looked down into my glass. I used to think not building the wall made me worse at the job. Maybe it makes you better. We sat a little longer after that. The silence between us changed. Heavier now, but not in a bad way. Eventually, I stood. I should go. He stood too, walked me to the elevator. Just before I stepped in, he said, If you ever want to come back, there's usually bourbon. And quiet. I nodded. Thanks. He didn't try to shake my hand. Didn't touch me at all. But his eyes stayed on me until the doors closed. And I couldn't stop thinking about them the whole way home. I didn't go back the next night. Or the one after that. But I thought about it. A lot. I'd catch myself halfway through a shift wondering what kind of bourbon he drank. Or if he sat up there alone every night, just watching the city hum below him like it didn't care who was hurting. Some nights, I drive by the building without meaning to, slow down just enough to glimpse the top floor. Nothing ever moved up there, no sign of life, but I knew he was there. I could feel it. 2 weeks passed. Then one night, after another long shift, I walked into my apartment and found the silence unbearable. I didn't change, didn't shower, just grabbed my jacket, keys, and went. When he opened the door, he didn't say anything. He didn't have to. He just stepped aside. This time, he didn't offer me a drink. Instead, he said, "Rooftop's too cold tonight. Come in." I followed him into the apartment. He dimmed the lights. There was music playing, low and soft, some piano instrumental I didn't recognize, but felt like it belonged. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, close but not touching. "You okay?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. He didn't push. Eventually, I said, there was a kid. 16. Got jumped outside his apartment. Nothing random. He knew the guys. He waited. He wouldn't talk, I said. Wouldn't give up names. Just kept saying he slipped on the stairs. Eli nodded slowly. I did that once. That caught me off guard. What? Covered for someone. Split lip. Broken wrist. Told my mom I tripped on the back steps. There was something in his voice that told me not to ask for details. So I didn't. Instead, I just said, yeah, that. He leaned back into the couch, one leg crossed over the other, hand resting near mine on the cushion. Why'd you come back? He asked, after a long stretch of quiet. I looked at him. Didn't want to be alone. He nodded once. Me neither. We didn't move, didn't talk, just sat there, letting the silence build into something thicker than air. Then, without turning his head, he said, I was wondering if you'd ever come back. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I was wondering if I'd let myself. Another pause. I don't get many people up here, he said. You seem like the type who chooses who he lets in. He glanced at me, the corner of his mouth pulling slightly. You're not wrong. I shifted, turned a little more toward him. Our knees were almost touching. Why me? I asked. His eyes didn't leave mine. Because the night we met, you looked like someone who was carrying more than he should have. And I know what that feels like. Something clicked in my chest. Not loud. Not painful. Just something I hadn't let click in a long time. He didn't move closer. Didn't reach for me. But his presence, the warmth of it, the calm, felt closer than most people ever got. And I didn't want to leave. So I didn't. I stayed. We didn't talk for a while after that. Just sat. Listened to the music. Let it fill the space our words couldn't. Eventually, I leaned back, closed my eyes, and said, I used to think this job would make me stronger. He waited. All it did was teach me how to hide better. Eli nodded slowly, like he understood. Hiding works. Until it doesn't. I turned my head toward him. You still hiding? His gaze didn't waver. Less than I used to. But yeah. Some days. Another silence. But this one felt warmer. Softer. Then he said, You ever let someone see the parts you're hiding? I blinked. You asking me that, as a guy who owns a rooftop view, or as a guy who gives bourbon to cops who show up broken? He smiled. Can't it be both? I didn't have an answer. So I didn't give one. Instead, I just looked at him. Really looked. And I knew if he leaned in right now, I wouldn't stop him. But he didn't. And somehow, that made it even more real. The third time I went to Eli's, it was raining. The kind of steady, drenching rain LA forgets how to handle. Gutters spilling over, traffic crawling, the whole city acting like the sky was punishing us personally. I showed up soaked, jacket clinging to my shoulders, water dripping down my neck. He didn't even blink. Just opened the door and said, I'll grab you a towel. I peeled off the jacket, boots, and followed him in like I lived there. He handed me a towel and then, without thinking, tugged my shirt out of my jeans and started drying my back like it was nothing. Just slow, careful strokes down my spine, the fabric warm from the dryer. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. The air between us felt tighter than usual, like something was circling, getting closer. I made dinner, he said eventually, stepping back like nothing had happened. Nothing fancy. Pasta and some overpriced wine I bought to impress someone who never showed. We ate on the couch. No TV, just the sound of the rain tapping the windows and his fork clinking against the plate. Somewhere between the second glass of wine and the third story about his failed app startup, he stopped mid-sentence and looked at me. Really looked. You always this quiet? He asked. I shrugged. Not always. But with me. I met his gaze. With you, it feels like I don't need to fill the space. He nodded like he understood, but didn't look away. And then, just like that, it was there. That shift. The moment. The pause between inhale and exhale. The space where something could happen. He set his glass down slowly. You okay if I ask you something and not take it back? My chest tightened. Yeah. He leaned in, elbows on his knees. Not touching me, just closer. Why haven't you kissed me? My mouth went dry. I didn't look away. I couldn't. Because I didn't want to screw it up, I said. He didn't smile, didn't flinch, just nodded once. I get that, he said, but I'm not a thing that breaks easy. I swallowed. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I leaned in. I didn't rush, didn't lunge or try to make it more than it was. I just leaned forward, met him halfway, and kissed him. It was slow. Intentional. The kind of kiss that says, I've been thinking about this longer than I want to admit. His mouth was warm, patient, like he'd been waiting too. When we pulled apart, we didn't say anything. We didn't need to. He just leaned his forehead against mine, eyes closed, breathing steady. After a long beat, he said, Was that what you expected? I shook my head slightly. No. Better or worse? Worse, I said. He pulled back, surprised. I smirked. Now I'm in trouble, he laughed, low and honest. We didn't kiss again that night. Not because we didn't want to, but because sometimes one kiss is enough to hold you over for a while. Like it plants something that needs time to bloom. When I left a few hours later, the rain had stopped, but everything else had changed. After the kiss, something between us shifted, but not in the way I expected. He didn't start texting me more. I didn't show up every night like we were suddenly in some kind of routine. It wasn't about urgency or needing to define what was happening. It was subtler than that. It was comfort. The next time I came over, I let myself in. He'd given me a key the week before. Just handed it to me one night like he was giving me a spare toothbrush or a favorite mug. No speech. No pressure. He just said, in case I'm out or asleep. That night he was on the couch, laptop open, reading something dense looking, glasses on. I hadn't seen him wear glasses before. They suited him, made him look less like a guy who owned cars worth more than my salary, and more like someone who got excited about obscure Wikipedia pages. Hey, he said, barely glancing up, food's in the oven. Yeah, I asked, stepping out of my boots. He nodded. Lasagna. Don't get too excited, it's frozen. I've had worse. You've had gas station sandwiches. Exactly. He smiled to himself and kept reading. I sat on the other end of the couch. We didn't talk much, just shared the silence. The soft clink of the fork when we ate. The occasional foot bump under the coffee table. It was easy, and that's what scared me. Later, after the plates were rinsed and we'd both changed into sweatpants, his place had become the kind of spot where I kept a spare hoodie. I leaned my head back against the couch and asked, Is this weird? He looked over. Is what weird? This, us, whatever this is. He thought about it, then said, It's only weird if we try to force it into a shape it doesn't want to be. I exhaled through my nose, spoken like someone who's done a lot of therapy. He smirked. Guilty. I turned toward him. He mirrored me. For a while, we just sat there, knees touching, faces maybe a foot apart. Close enough that I could feel the heat of him, smell the faint citrus of his soap. I reached for his hand without thinking. He didn't flinch, just laced our fingers together and held it there, like we'd always done that. I didn't think I'd ever do this again, I said. What? He asked, voice low. Let someone see me. He looked at me like he saw all the things I wasn't saying. And then he said, You never really stopped. You just got good at hiding. I kissed him again, slower this time, Not nervous, not questioning. His hands found the back of my neck, steady and warm, like he knew I needed something to anchor me. We didn't rush, didn't strip each other down like we were in some cheap movie. We just stayed close. At one point, he pulled back just slightly and whispered, "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah. Are you?" He smiled, eyes soft. More than I want to admit. That night, I stayed over. Not because we planned it, just because we didn't want the night to end. Sleeping next to Eli felt different than I expected. I thought I'd lie awake, too aware of everything, his breathing, his heat, the way the sheets smelled like him. But I didn't. I fell asleep faster than I had in weeks, maybe months. Woke up to soft light filtering in through the tall windows, and the quiet sound of him making coffee barefoot in the kitchen. No shirt. Just sweatpants low on his hips. I watched him for a minute before saying anything. "You always look like this in the morning?" He looked over, smirked. "Like what?" "Like a magazine ad," he snorted, poured a second mug. "It's the lighting." He handed me the coffee, our fingers brushing. He didn't pull away, just stood there for a second, looking at me like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure how. I leaned against the counter. "You ever do this before?" He raised an eyebrow. "What? Make coffee for cops?" I smiled. "This. Wake up with someone who didn't sneak out." He was quiet for a beat too long. "No," he said finally. "Not like this." I nodded. Took a sip of the coffee. It was too strong, slightly bitter. Perfect. After breakfast, toast and eggs. Simple stuff we made side by side like we'd done it a dozen times. He walked me to the door. I was still in uniform from the night before. Had to head straight to the station. He leaned in, kissed me lightly. Nothing dramatic. Just a soft press of lips like punctuation. "Be safe," he said, hand resting at my waist. "You too," I said. "Don't let the espresso machine explode again." He grinned. "That was one time. Once is enough." He let go, but not all at once. His fingers dragged just a little as I stepped back, like he wasn't quite ready to let go. And honestly, neither was I. As I walked to my car, I realized something that both thrilled and terrified me. This was starting to feel like something I could miss. That night, things went sideways. A call came in around midnight, shots fired outside a bar downtown. When we got there, it was chaos. People shouting, ducking, screaming about some guy in a hoodie who bolted after firing into the air. No one was hit, but adrenaline was high. Everyone was on edge. We spread out. I rounded the back alley with my hand on my holster, flashlight slicing through the dark. Didn't find the shooter, but I found a kid, maybe 17, shaking behind a dumpster. No weapon, just scared. Hands up, eyes wide. I calmed him down, called for backup, walked him out myself, but I didn't stop thinking about the look in his eyes. Pure fear. I went home after the shift, didn't even shower. Just sat on my couch in the dark, uniform still on, feeling like my skin didn't fit right. And without thinking, I texted Eli. Me. "You up?" A few seconds later. Eli, always. Me. "Can I come over?" Eli. "Doors open." I didn't say much when I got there. He didn't ask. He just pulled me into the apartment, into his arms, into something that felt suspiciously like safety. We stood in the dark for a long time. No words. Just breathing. He didn't ask what happened that night. Didn't push for details or try to get inside my head. Just handed me a clean t-shirt, pointed toward the bathroom, and told me there were toothbrushes under the sink. It wasn't just kindness, it was familiarity. By the time I came out, he was in bed, the covers turned down, one side open like it had always been mine. I slid in beside him, not saying a word. He turned off the bedside lamp, rolled toward me, and rested a hand on my chest, fingers spread, grounding. He didn't try to touch more, didn't expect anything. Just laid there, close enough to feel every rise and fall of my breath. I think I whispered something. maybe thank you, or I don't know how to keep doing this. I honestly don't remember. All I know is that I fell asleep with his hand still on my chest and woke up with his body curled around mine. He was warm, steady, a quiet presence in a world full of sirens. The next morning, we made breakfast again. Neither of us said much. At one point, while I was pouring coffee, he said, "You ever think about not doing this anymore?" He didn't mean us, he meant the job. I didn't answer right away. Then I said sometimes, but it's the only thing I've ever been good at. He didn't argue, didn't give me the "you're more than your badge" speech I'd heard from a couple people before. He just nodded. Yeah, I get that. And that was somehow better than anything else he could have said. Later, while I was getting dressed, he leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, watching me like I was some unsolvable riddle. "What?" I asked. He shrugged. "Just trying to figure out how someone like you stayed so untouched." I looked down at my uniform shirt. "I'm not." He stepped closer. "No, I mean, there's a lot of guys who go through what you've seen and it twists them, makes them hard, bitter, cruel even." "You think I'm not?" I asked. He smiled. "I think you're tired, but not twisted." That landed harder than I wanted it to. "You make it really fucking hard to deflect," I muttered, adjusting my belt. He stepped up behind me, arms sliding around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. "Maybe I'm not trying to let you deflect." We stood like that for a while. Then I turned, faced him fully. "I don't know what this is," I said quietly. "I don't either," he said, just as honest. "But I want to keep finding out." He nodded. "Me too." I kissed him again before I left. And this time, it felt like a promise. It didn't change overnight. My job was still my job. Eli still lived in his penthouse, still wore impossibly soft sweaters, and drank wine with names I couldn't pronounce. I still wore the same uniform every shift, still came home smelling like sweat, coffee, and asphalt. But the space between us got smaller, not rushed, just closer. I started keeping a spare change of clothes in his bathroom drawer. He started texting me around 7 p.m. most nights. Sometimes just a, "You good?" Sometimes a simple, "Keys under the mat." He never asked where we stood, never pressured me to call it anything. But one night, a month after the first time I kissed him, I got off a double shift and showed up at his place with a split lip and bruised knuckles. Nothing serious. Just the kind of scuffle that comes with breaking up a bar fight where nobody wants to go home quietly. He opened the door, took one look at me, and just said, "Get in." He cleaned the cut on my lip with warm water and something expensive that didn't sting. I sat on the bathroom counter while he worked, legs dangling like a kid. He was quiet, focused. "You're mad," I said. "I'm not," he replied. "You're not talking." He looked up at me then, and there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Not fear, not judgment, just worry. "You're going to get hurt," he said quietly. "Really hurt. I can take care of myself." He didn't respond. Instead, he pressed a clean towel to my jaw, held it there with one hand, and said, "I know you can. That's not the point." I didn't argue. Not because he was right, but because I didn't want to say the thing I was thinking, that it didn't matter how tough I was. Sometimes, I still came apart. Sometimes, I still needed someone to hold me together. That night, after we'd both changed into clean shirts in silence, I found myself staring at the ceiling in his bed while he lay beside me, one hand resting gently on my chest again, like he'd made that his default place. "Can I tell you something?" I asked. He turned slightly. "Yeah, I think I've been waiting for something like this longer than I've wanted to admit." He didn't respond right away. Then he said, "Me too." And somehow, that was enough. Weeks passed. Then months. It didn't turn into some perfect story. We fought once about something stupid. Laundry, I think. Another time, I showed up 3 hours late and didn't text because I was too wrung out from a call where a guy didn't make it. But every time I came back, he was there. No questions, no ultimatums. Just a hand on my back, or a drink waiting on the table, or the simple act of silence made safe. Eventually, I brought him to meet a few friends. Some raised eyebrows, but nobody said anything. Eli just smiled, said all the right things, and held my hand under the table when I started to overthink it all. He made it easy to forget that I used to be alone. He made it harder to imagine going back. The first time I said it, I didn't even mean to. We were sitting on the rooftop again. Summer night, warm air, skyline flickering in the distance. I had my boots off. He was nursing some overpriced beer. We weren't talking. Just leaning into each other, elbows brushing. And I looked at him. Really looked. He felt like home. So I said it, quietly, barely more than a breath. I love you. He didn't move, didn't flinch. He just smiled like he'd been waiting for me to say it. Then he leaned over, kissed me once, slow and steady, and said, "Yeah, me too."